Section 21 of the Soul or Rational Psychology. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Travis Bissell. Chapter 14, Part 3 of the Soul or Rational Psychology by Emanuel Swedenborg. Translated by Frank Sewall, 1837 to 1915, and others. Section 21. Hatred. 214. Hatred is not an absence of love, but it is the love of evil, consequently the hatred of truth. Hatred is both natural and acquired. Natural hatred is the contrary of love, but acquired hatred is the contrary of friendship. As love is a pleasing affection, delighting the sensories, repairing the bloods and animal spirits with new heat, light, and life, and restoring the single parts of the body, so hatred is an unpleasant affection, which grieves the sensories, and disturbs the bloods and animal spirits, depriving them of their better life, and destroying the several parts of the body. The lower mind is then in anguish, and the brain compressed. It is exhilarated, rendered serene, and expanded alone by misfortunes of others, just as love is a conjunction of dispositions, animus, and minds, mens. Hatred is their disjunction, and as love is life and heaven, hatred is death and hell. Disagreements, discords, and disharmonies arise from hatred. The highest joy of the most intense hatred would result if heaven and earth should fall. But there are many causes, kinds, and degrees of natural and acquired hatred. The causes of natural hatred proceed from the state of the pure intellect and soul, since there are as many diverse states as there are souls and intellectories. For there are spiritual essences and forms, more perfect and more imperfect, best and worst. In these love and harmony dwell, and in those hatred and discord. Those in which love is are celestial essences, and according to the degree of love are nearer to the highest love or God, and are more grateful and happy. But those in which hatred is are infernal essences, and according to the degree of hatred more remote from God, more ungrateful and unhappy. Acquired hatred, indeed, is caused and increased by dissimilarity of dispositions, and by discord and collision of minds, and of the desires and wishes which the ends themselves declare. All desired ends are pleasant to the minds. Hatred is begotten of dissent, difference, and opposition. In order that love may exist, one gives away while the other acts, and on the other hand, hatred arises by the opposition of one to the other. As the love of the end is the measure of friendship, so is opposition of end the measure of hatred. Other things concerning hatred worthy of observation are to be deduced from the description of loves, since hatred is contrary to love. Self-love, ambition, haughtiness, pride. 215. Ambition is not love, but is something superadded or an adjunct to love, which if separated from love, love would not be active but passive. We have seen that love is the life both of the mind and animus, for there is no such thing as mind nor animus without love. Ambition is indeed the force of this life, or the ardor of testifying the love of the mind. Thus the passive principle is love and its active ambition, whence it follows that there are as many ambitions or kinds of ambition as there are loves. Thus there is ambition and conjugal love in the love of parents towards their children, in the love of society, and in self-love. The reason why ambition is frequently taken for love is because love and ambition taken together constitute one's mind, mens, disposition, animus, or one's life. Now, because ambition is joined to love, as husband to wife, and there are loves more or less perfect, or those which are virtues and those which are vices. So there are more or less perfect ambitions, or those which are virtues and those which are vices. For ambition derives its essence and nature from the love to which it is bound or wedded. Ambition is a vice or is spurious when joined to self-love, but it is a virtue or is legitimate when joined to the love of society. 216. Depraved or illegitimate ambition, which is joined to self-love, desires the highest things, and the higher it climbs, the higher it aspires, and it increases as it goes on. Especially does it desire the dignities, the supreme honors, the wealth of the world, even heaven itself as its subject. So the ambition of Adam remains deeply rooted in the nature of his posterity, and each as a child of earth desires in mind to occupy all heaven. He emulates the omnipresence of deity through his fame, its providence through his universal care, its omnipotence through his more than regal power, even also its omniscience, for he is ignorant that there is anything which he does not know, and so persuades himself that he knows everything. So ambition obstructs the way to wisdom and opens one to ignorance. Carried away by ambition, he does not regard himself as a part of the universe, but as the universe itself, at least thinking that the universe exists on his account, of which universe he is nevertheless the smallest part, and all the smaller in that he seems to himself so great. For ambition is joined with the contempt of everything outside of self, although this is cunningly concealed. In his own regard he is all. He burns at every word which might injure his dignity and glory, while he laughs and inwardly is pleased at everything which raises him, even though it were to the stars. Such ambition is for the most part natural or connate, and it increases by the favor of fortune, which is an indication of the perverse state of the pure intellect, the form of whose intellectual ideas or truths is discordant and adverse to the order of nature. But what the soul may be is not for us to judge. This heat of affection in the rational mind is properly called ambition, where there is a species of insanity joined to ignorance, for it admires and contemplates itself and its form in every idea. This ambition in the animus or in the common sensory passes for haughtiness, or in the body for pride, because it is the effect of haughtiness and an elation of the animus, and it shows itself in ridiculous gestures, supercilious bearing, affectation of titles, pomp of family, of friends, of servants, of horses, of garments, decked with superfluous ornaments, and in many other things which provoke laughter. Such an ambition, because it is a force and an ardor, and because the affection itself in which it resides is a pleasing one, makes glad and expands the internal as well as the external sensories, the cerebrum, fibers, arteries, ducts, viscera, and the body, whence it is said to be puffed up and to inflate. Thus, naturally, it repairs and restores the condition when everything is favorable, and pours into it as it were new life. It is nevertheless only like a beautiful wax figure stuffed with vile matter. But if perchance it is cut off from hope or fortune, it falls either into infantile crying, into silliness, into sorrow, or into insanity, for the ardor of the mind is either extinguished or remains only as madness. There are many causes, qualities, degrees, and differences of this vanity. 217. That ambition, however, is a virtue or is legitimate, which is joined to the love of society and country. This never begets pride, much less haughtiness, but humility and contempt of self. It regards self as the smallest part of the universe, and inwardly rejoices that it is able to perform so many duties. It desires and attempts great and sublime things, not on account of self, but for the public good. To itself it is nothing. To its country it is everything. If it desires honors, riches, or wisdom, it is that by these only it may serve the more. It turns away from that illegitimate ambition as from a disease. Thus it is known from love or from end what ambition is. Such a mind indicates a most perfect state of the pure intellect, whose ideas are so many celestial truths, and at the same time a state of the internal sensory corresponding to the intellectory. So it is natural rather than acquired, for even if imbibed by rules, it is rarely so acquired as to be constantly active, unless it be continually deprived of its own natural ardor, and so accommodated to the influx of the higher mind. 218. But the loftiest or spiritual ambition, proper to the soul, is that which is joined to the love of celestial society. This sees its own glory and felicity not in itself, but in the love of God and in his kingdom, which it earnestly desires to promote. It is humble, a worshipper of deity, a contemner of self, but in the degree it is less to itself, it is greater before God. To this end, this zeal is granted to souls and ambition to human minds. Humility, contempt, lowliness of mind, Animus. 219. There is a natural and an acquired humility, as also an internal humility, or that of the mind, and an external humility, or that of the animus and body. Natural humility arises from self-contempt, whence it is an affection contrary to illegitimate ambition or self-love, and wholly united to love toward others, for which reason it is worthy to be called legitimate ambition. For as far as we recede from love of self, so far do we enter into a love toward others as being all more excellent and higher than ourselves. Properly, it is shown toward superiors, and thus it is a kind of veneration, for love toward superiors is shown by veneration, so that it is veneration itself. For this reason, humility is a virtue, and if it is innate or natural, it has its roots in the pure intellect itself. And if in the soul itself, it is an evidence of love toward God, and so it is an annihilation of self, whence is the highest religion, adoration, and the imploring of grace. From the adoration itself, which is an act of humility, may be known the quality and quantity of this love. The reason why humility is proof of love towards others, either in reality superior and more perfect, or else so esteemed, is because it is natural. If we would have the love of another and his work influence us, for us to extinguish the ardor of our animus and mind, and to reduce these to a kind of passivity, then the love of another is that which operates with our love, and is that active principle which should exist in love in order that it may be the heat of our life. Hence is it that humility is the cause of the conjunction of the minds of others with ours, and the very origin itself of benevolence. Without this state of our mind, divine love could never operate upon us. Indeed, spurious ambition itself, through its own activity, throws off every influx and entirely extinguishes it. No affection more approves of this virtue, or covers it with praises, than vicious or illegitimate ambition. For this demands humility of all, because it prefers itself to all. On the other hand, God, who demands this humility, not from love of self, but from love of the human race, that we may be disposed to the operations of his love, and for the reception of grace. He does not demand glory for its own sake, For he is in his own glory, and himself is glory, to whom nothing can be added through our glorification, but because the proof of glory is adoration, which is according to our veneration toward our superiors. It is by this that we declare our love. 220. Humility which is acquired does not derive its origin from nature and inclination, or from principles engrafted in our pure intellect and soul, but from principles through the reflection of our mind, drawn from our own experience or from that of others who teach us. And if we put faith in our masters, and ourselves acknowledge the truth as examined by them, there arises a principle out of which either virtues or vices are acquired. Thus, if we are imbued with truths, especially with this truth, that illegitimate ambition or love of self is a vice and an impediment to the communication of the loves of another and particularly of a superior, then as far as self-love recedes, so far does love toward others and that of others towards us, and thence humility succeed in its place. This, in the course of time, these principles being deeply implanted, passes over into the pure intellect and becomes as it were natural, and it is transferred to posterity, as if it were an inclination, and this is the origin of natural humility. This humility is called internal. 221. External humility is of the animus and body alone, and not of the rational mind. For self-love and spurious ambition can be implanted in the mind and the entire internal sensory, or our rational intellect can be occupied by this love, and nevertheless, externally, humility can be simulated, contempt of self, love toward others, toward society, even toward God, in a word, honesty and virtue. Vices can also be simulated, the love of self, contempt of friends, and many other things. Such humility is called external because it is outside of the mind, and, as it were, superficial, for the mind is a superior or internal animus, subject to which is the will, because the intellect, judgment, and choice are. The mind to which the will belongs is able to command the external or lower animus, and thence the body, and indeed by such art that it can cause that nothing of the mind shall show itself in the countenance. For every affection there are certain corresponding expressions of face, of bodily form, of gesture, and of action. Thus the joyful expression of humility in the face of the lover and the beloved is as it were not each one's own state, but that of the other. Veneration itself appears in the form of actions, in the accent of speech, and the style of language, as a certain yielding and obedience. But the deepest humility breaks out even into tears, or into a pitiable condition of the body. We are prostrated, we cry out that we are as nothing, and beat upon our breasts. These are the natural effects of humility in the body, and it spontaneously flows forth in this manner when verily present in its signs. But all this we are also taught to feign. 222. Lowliness is of mind or of spirits is a virtue as well as a vice. It is a virtue when humility is acquired from principle, or when self-love and spurious ambition are expelled from our minds, for then there succeeds at once an ambition of serving and obeying others, or of suffering ourselves to be controlled by others. Both self-love and ambition, or this animus, are cast down by sicknesses, disease, misfortune, anxieties. But these are of the divine providence. Lowliness of mind is, on the other hand, an evil when it arises from a sudden extinction of ardor or of a spurious ambition, the self-love remaining without its ardor or without the possibility of acting. Then force or violence is done especially to the internal organs, and thence to the external ones, and those of the body. And there is a breaking out into weeping, despair, frenzy, grief, disease, insanity, and madness. End of section 21.